the desert of the real.
Welcome to the Desert of the Real. Your hosts are Ryan Hudson and Jason Dietz. The Desert of the Real is a movie podcast where Jason Dietz is forced to watch the big blockbuster movies he refuses to watch because he doesn't think they're worth his time. We are currently going through the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Ryan and Jason are two high school English, film, philosophy, and creativity teachers with graduate degrees using their academic training to dig deeply into movies. They're exploring the creativity, philosophy, and film studies, also ethics, in the films that they review. And they push listeners to think critically about their entertainment.
This is part 2 of Captain Marvel. Thank you, Donald.
Yeah, thanks, Donald.
Hold on. Donald, how did you not see this movie? You saw every movie. You just told us. Midnight premiere. How didn't you see this movie?
If you'll permit me to go on something of a rant.
Yeah.
Should we
Go for it.
Jason is getting up and leaving the room.
To the pod.
He thinks he's got
All right.
enough time to leave the room.
So essentially what I'm about to go into
Yeah.
is the importance of the name Captain Marvel.
Oh, okay.
Captain Marvel is intensely important to the comic book world in ways people don't really understand.
Yeah.
Here's the reason I hadn't watched Captain Marvel before preparing for this podcast. And I think it's important in critically thinking about something you're watching is understanding why it exists. So the name Captain Marvel is intensely important in the comic book world and our culture and pertaining to comic books, pop culture, all of that. Have you ever said, say the magic word?
Please?
But have you ever said that to your children?
Oh, say the magic word?
Yeah.
What's the
I'm
magic
sure.
word?
Okay, perfect. So that actually comes from a character, Shazam, or Captain Marvel in the DC universe. Okay, so we're going to start in 1938. So here I have, our listeners can't see this, but Dietz and Ryan are looking at a reprint
A first issue of Superman worth millions of dollars in my hand. How did it get here?
So this is a reprint from Loot Crate. But this character changed everything in the comic book world. So this
character
is
being Superman.
Yes. So Action Comics #1, Superman came out. He was the first character to have otherworldly powers. So he could do things that normal people couldn't do. Normally comic books were detectives, agents, that sort of thing. Superman comes in, disrupts the comic book industry. Wiz Comics in 1940 asks CC, I can't remember his last name, but the creator of Captain Marvel, he created a Superman character. They were asking for just a knockoff Superman character, and he created the first fantasy character of a child who becomes something entirely different. So he has superpowers that they justify that his powers come from great mythological creatures, mythological people from history. But he is the first character who starts out as a normal child, something that a child could relate to, and then becomes more powerful. This is a wonderful way of a child to feel competent and powerful through the world of fiction. This comic only ran from 1940 to 1950. So the book we're looking at for listeners who can't read is The Power of Hope, written and illustrated by Alex Ross, who is one of the most prolific comic book artists, if not one of the most prolific artists in modern history. So the idea is, and if you want to learn more about this, Alex Ross actually has a video on the subject on why Shazam used to be Captain Marvel. So you can look that up. Okay, so in 1940, 1950, we run Captain Marvel. After World War II, superheroes actually lose popularity, and we start going more into realistic war comics, detective comics, that sort of thing. So Captain Marvel kind of gets lost to history. But DC was still interested in Shazam because of his his resemblance to Superman, or Shazam, Captain Marvel, you name it. Okay, so there was a lot of legal conflict between DC and Wiz Comics about the likeness of Captain Marvel. So Captain Marvel was the pinnacle of a lawsuit against these two comic book companies. Wiz Comics promised to stop producing Captain Marvel comics, and nobody was using the character. In 1960, after the name Captain Marvel was lost to obscurity, some comic book company came up with a silly version of Captain Marvel that he would say the magic words Zam rather than Shazam, and his arms, legs, and head would pop off, and he could use that power to fight crime. Marvel, the comic book company, came in, saw that, they're like, Captain Marvel, we should use that name. So they created, at the idea of Jack Kirby, which is another prolific comic book artist, to create Captain Marvel, or Marvel, which was the inspiration for the scientist in Captain Marvel. So that was the first Captain Marvel. And then the problem so they copyrighted the name Captain Marvel. The problem is Captain Marvel was never popular enough to have a maintained series. And so
my understanding is it was similar to Green Lantern. It would just kind of jump around. Like Rogue got the powers at one point or something.
Because writers were having trouble selling books, so they kept doing reiterations of the character. And to maintain a copyright of the name, they had to... they would stop producing the books because they weren't selling, but they'd have to revamp it in order to keep the name of Captain Marvel. In the 1970s, DC brought back Shazam at the behest of Jack Kirby, who unfortunately wasn't attached to the book because he lives on the West Coast and they were making it on the East Coast. And they brought back Captain Marvel, but they couldn't use the name Captain Marvel because of the copyright of Marvel Studios. But he got popular again, and they had, on the cover of the comic book, they had to use the name Shazam. They can use Captain Marvel inside the comic book, but not on the cover.
'Cause I remember reading Kingdom Come, and he's only known as Captain Marvel. And I was always... It wasn't until the movies came out, like, that sounds weird to call him Shazam.
New 52 in the 2010s changed that. And for our comic book listeners, they'll understand what I meant by that. Okay, so Captain Marvel and DC, Shazam becomes popular again, but they can't use it. So for a long period of time, the only reason that Captain Marvel comics existed was so that they could keep the copyright of the name. It wasn't a character anyone asked for. Marvel was just pushing this character on audiences in order to keep the name, so DC couldn't use Captain Marvel on the cover of their comic books.
Okay, wait.
Carol Danvers, as we know her now, started out as Miss Marvel and was fairly popular, but not popular enough to have her own series. She was mostly used in team-up comic books. But again, they needed to produce a Captain Marvel comic book in order to keep the copyright of the name, so they made Miss Marvel, Carol Danvers, who started out as a love interest for Marvel and got her powers by absorbing the DNA of Captain Marvel. And then she got the power. Captain America in the comics suggests that she should take the mantle of Captain Marvel so that they could use the name Captain Marvel again to keep the copyright of what I consider to be the much better, more relevant character of Captain Marvel. So Captain Marvel, in the Marvel Universe, her power set, the reason she exists is empty and devoid of real substance because she's a character nobody asked for.
Well,
and so I never watched the movie because I wasn't interested.
Oh, nice. That's awesome.
Fair enough.
Like Donald here, he brought books. We're looking at this big book of beautiful Alex Ross artwork of DC Captain Marvel.
So the cultural significance of the DC Captain Marvel is way more prolific than the Marvel's Captain Marvel.
Yeah,
because
hold on, Donald.
So any character...
Maybe that's why I liked this movie.
But like, because Captain Marvel for Marvel was kind of like one of the new, like a new character relative to like all the classic ones we already know and love. And
Right. They could have named her anything. They
know,
only
but-
named her Captain Marvel because they wanted
Yeah, because they
to
are
keep
Marvel.
the name.
And
the character itself wouldn't have lasted if they weren't pushing it on consumers to keep the name.
I don't know.
but I
enough about
like
it.
Donald. I like that you came so prepared. That's awesome.
Yeah, that is.
But it's crazy. That's the reason you didn't go see it. But because
Well-
I know you, and you were a big fan of all of this stuff.
Another reason is this. So, Captain Marvel is a feminist character.
Yeah.
It was meant to be, and when they made the comic book Carol Danvers, or Captain Marvel with Carol Danvers as the lead, the idea was the liberated woman.
All right, should we get into film studies of the real now? Because
My wife is actually, she is less feminist than I am, and so my wife got annoyed at like the feminist garbage that was coming out, because this was the same time period that like the female Ghostbusters came out. She didn't want to watch it. I didn't go see it, and I was just being stubborn because this is my Captain Marvel. Shazam is my Captain Marvel, and I didn't want to pay money to the studio. I actually wish that the Captain Marvel was more feminist, and I'm not sure if he would agree with me on this, but there's some usefulness for spectacle in life.
Yeah.
Like fireworks, for example.
Yeah.
There's nothing literary about fireworks. You just see explosions and lights. But I think there's something good for the soul to experience spectacle, because it helps create a variety in our lives, and I think that's why fun pop movies are good to an extent, because it just takes us away from the pain and suffering of our lives and kind of creates a release. But the problem is that people are replacing their diet of literature and commentary, and they're just consuming movies and entertainment. And movies and entertainment were just meant to be spectacle, but
I guess
people are trying to elevate them.
I think
more.
It's an actor. It might even be Willem Dafoe. It might not be, but he had a quote, or someone had a quote recently. It's like, people don't want to watch a too deep movie at the end of a work day. They work all day. They come home. It's time to relax. They're not going to flip on like Oppenheimer or something. They'll flip on a 90-minute thingy.
That is the reason I haven't watched Pym's Labyrinth. That is high on my list.
So good.
I want to watch it so badly, but I want to give energy to it.
Right. There's a movie that's on my watch list, Once Upon a Time in America, which is almost 4 hours. I'm like, how am I going to get the time to watch this movie? You know, we need popcorn movies. We need deep movies.
Well, the marriage comes in where we spend our time. And I don't think, at least currently, I don't think we're expending our time towards a balanced diet, to continue the food metaphor. It's just all M&Ms.
Right.
And Eminem the rapper, too. That was a joke. Move on.
So, anyhow, like, I feel like the Shazam stuff illustrates the power of going beyond this is what we have on the screen.
Right.
Because you have a massive depth, in this case, of loathing or whatever, for the movie that probably almost no one else can have, because you have this, you've spent the time, you've done the research, and you have this wellspring of information and understanding that you bring to this movie that very few other people.
I just love Captain Marvel, like the DC's Captain Marvel,
Right.
so much.
Yeah.
Like, Jack Kirby was inspired by Captain Marvel, so this is something that actually part of it. So back in the 1940s, before Marvel Comics became Marvel Comics, it was Timely Comics, and he was writing for Captain America, and he took a job with Wiz Comics to write on Captain Marvel, and he actually got fired for working on a different company's comic book. But then he was back and forth from Marvel and DC a couple different times, and each Captain Marvel that we have is because of Jack Kirby, and he saw this character, and he liked this character because of just how pure and hopeful it was.
Yeah.
And I think if we had more characters that showed children a representation of their inner strength and potential,
Right.
it would be a better world.
Yeah.
And we should focus less on aesthetics and fads and more on just pure fantasy in the context that the original Captain Marvel is in.
Yeah.
You know, and so if you compare that to the character of Marvel's Captain Marvel, it's just good versus evil. It's really hollow versus the allegory that is the character of Shazam.
Yeah. It was interesting because I've actually watched the Shazam movie, and I didn't get any of that out of that Shazam movie.
Well,
So
that's because they kind of took a different approach.
Right.
Because in the comics, Billy is an orphan, and in the movie estranged child. Anyway, he lost his mom. But in the comic books, he's actually raising his younger sister.
Oh, cool.
And he uses Captain Marvel to get like a 9-to-5 job, and he goes to school, and he fights crime. And he's just like this selfless, altruistic child. And in the movie, they chose to make him kind of a bratty, angsty kid. Because in the comic books, and I understand for like a modern audience, they kind of wanted to make it a little darker, more. The idea behind Shazam is just doing good because you love humanity. Yeah. And Alex Ross gets that as an artist and as a writer. And I'm not going to make you read this book, but superheroes are supposed to inspire us to be the best versions of ourselves. And if we don't portray that in movies or comic books, I think we're doing a disservice to people. And I think, unfortunately, with the fad of making movies and stories gritty and realistic, we kind of sacrifice what superheroes are supposed to be, and they're supposed to inspire us. One of my negatives, I don't know if we're there yet, is Captain America's not very, pardon, we're going to do this the whole episode. Captain Marvel's not very heroic. She destroys a lot of property. She blatantly steals stuff. With the exception of her helping refugees, she doesn't really do anything to help people, which is another comparison that I made with DC's Captain Marvel, where his only existence is to lift other people up, where I feel for the majority of the movie, she's kind of an angsty bully.
I watched half this movie, and then the next day I was watching it again. Also, my 4-year-old daughter came in, and Talos was an alien, and it scared her. It was too scary for her. She's like, tell me when I can look, which was kind of funny. I'm like, no, they're good guys. Anyway, my wife watched part of the end, and she's like, man, she's just so annoying. That's my wife. Just being annoyed by her, because she is very arrogant, and part of me just wants to say maybe it's undeserved arrogance. I guess there's that scene where she's talking to Nick Fury, and she's like, congratulations, you just asked your first relevant question. I'm like, you're being annoying.
Not to bring up Iron Man, but we're going to bring up Iron Man.
You're invoking his name.
I am invoking Iron Man, because if that is your...
I don't know.
You have to defend that.
Okay, I can defend that.
Go for it.
Robert Downey Jr. is arrogant in a fun way.
No, he's
Brie
not.
Larson's
He's
character in Captain America is boring and whiny.
See, I don't agree.
I'm glad.
I mean, I admittedly, whoever the actress is, maybe she's great in other movies. She was not that good here. There's not a lot of emotional range to her.
She's not very expressive.
Right.
And I think what they were trying to do is show somebody who's emotionally dead inside because of again, the abusive relationship.
Right.
But she's just lukewarm for the whole movie, and the whole movie is talking about her being like, control your emotions, control your emotions.
That's that also annoys me.
And then it showed her being like emotionless, and people were like, calm down, Carol.
That's okay.
I'm with Donald on that.
I'm not with Donald at all on that, because I think that's the whole reason why she's doing what she's doing in terms of emotion is because it's been beaten out of her. And so the minor moments where she's minorly being emotional, for him to call that out suggests just how much beaten down she has been, that this little minor display of emotion is now being called out and beaten down. So my read on it was completely different from y'all two's read, apparently.
I do want to admit that I think that I wasn't necessarily the audience for this movie.
Like, she is, even before puberty or whatever we're going to call that moment where she's takes out the social programming chip and she's like, wah! Even before that, she is the most powerful character in this film.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what I don't understand how her arrogance is unwarranted. She's stronger than the Jude Law character. She's stronger than anyone else in the team. She's stronger than the Talos or the Skrull people. I feel like her arrogance is way more warranted than Iron Man's arrogance, because all Iron Man does is makes tech. She is in and of herself the most powerful being that she knows. So I don't get that.
I think part of it is we don't really see her struggle at any point. She just overcomes every obstacle in her path. And so when we're watching a story about a hero, we want to see them overcome challenges. And we just watch Captain Marvel clear every hurdle that's put in front of her.
That's right. That's because she hasn't come to the hurdle that challenges her yet. So I
want to watch that movie.
Right. I would love to watch that movie. Because, like, okay, again, coming from my own personal perspective on my students, I loved this movie because it illustrated once you let go and overcome or master that social programming, like, you can run over everything. Like, all of these blocks that society puts in your way and shapes you and limits you, once you dismiss those, you can do whatever you want. You can overcome anything.
Maybe that's why, if we did have the structure of we saw her life first, that would have made more sense, because then it'd be like, yeah, you're being held back and it's not your fault.
Yeah.
But with the structure as it is, it's like she's just an annoying character.
Okay. So now, like, we're back to where we've gone over it 3 times, so we're just gonna have to disagree.
And I think that superhero movies are really guilty of that, because there are a lot of superhero movies that take chances on the character of well-known superheroes that create controversy amongst fans that are already endeared to this fandom.
Right.
A great example of that is Batman vs. Superman, which if Batman vs. Superman was made with 2 unknown characters, it would be an instant classic. But because it was made with Batman and Superman, and Zack Snyder, in a lot of people's opinion, didn't do justice to those characters, it was a major bomb.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in a lot of people's mind, the existence of Captain Marvel is a slight against a more beloved, more important character in comic book history.
But it's maybe how you feel with Robert Downey Jr. When he says something, it annoys you, but like, oh, what a funny line. But I feel like if it was someone else, I don't know how it might fix it, but it's just, instead of being annoying,
I just think it was poor casting, in my opinion.
No, I agree. Yeah, I said at the very start, I said I didn't feel like she was that great of a...
Yeah, that might be it. I mean, this movie, so it's what's kind of cool is she's basically now Marvel's Superman. She can just...
Right.
So I think, we'll see how they deal with it in Endgame, but then the Marvels has a fun workaround to... Because you can't Superman's so strong, Captain Marvel is so strong, but her next movie with the Marvels they do have a fun way to work her into fight things and not be like the strongest thing ever type of thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so a few more things. the boring smoky planet of the Skrulls, like that's like a Star Trek episode. Like it's just rocks and fog. It's boring. Inside the Supreme Intelligence looks boring. Like the comics,
Matrixy.
The Supreme Intelligence is a giant green face, and they're getting Annette Bening's in there because she's famous, and I don't hate that idea that she just the thing looks like a different person for everyone, but the setting is just white.
You wanted more like Guardians 2 kind of thing.
I don't know. They could have done anything. They could have literally done anything.
That is true. That's fair. Can I just offer?
Oh, yeah. Go on. Go.
Because because that part of this I felt was like either a nod or an homage to the Matrix. So if you think of the first Matrix movie, when Neo very first encounters the Matrix, that's what it looks like. Like it's just white, and there's a television set, and there's 2 chairs, and that's it.
Yeah.
So for me, since this was her very first time encountering the Supreme Intelligence, I felt like that's what they were doing. Maybe I'm giving them too much credit. Probably I am, but that's what I got.
And from a movie history point of view, I think there was a direct reference to the movie Contact. Are you guys familiar with that? Yeah. So I think the idea of Contact arguably did the best job of what it would feel like to encounter an intelligence that we couldn't comprehend as humans.
Beyond.
And I think that they were trying to incorporate that in the movie.
Yeah.
Speaking of, also, I guess, movie recommendations, I think the spaceship chase in the canyons, I don't know how it's not influenced by Independence Day.
Yeah, for sure. That's what I thought.
But then there's one when she's on the train, which it is kind of fun when she just punches the old lady.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, oh. It's the Skrull. And Nick Fury is down below, crashing into people. That's got to be a French Connection reference. Yeah. And part of me is like, French Connection did this way better. But
I think that's my criticism of this movie is there are just so many movies that did this better.
Right. Like, yes. Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's because like if you're comparing, okay, so the French Connection is a masterpiece, right? And we have this one little scene in this movie that's doing something like the French Connection did. I don't think it's fair to say, well, this movie sucks because it didn't do this like the French Connection did. It's just an homage. It's just like a nod to.
Is it?
Okay, maybe I have no idea. I don't know
joking.
what they were
No.
doing. So I have one more positive.
Okay.
I thought the shape shifting was awesome.
I think it's good too.
It looked really, really good.
Because it's kind of gross.
Yeah.
And it
looked really good.
I like it when the guy turns into the same girl as the other one and like, I'm this one. Get a new one.
Yeah. So you've mentioned a number of times that the CGI gets bad eventually. I keep waiting for that to happen. It wasn't this movie.
No.
I thought this movie was amazing.
The next one's fine.
Okay. Cool. So that's it. Those are my positives.
One more big negative, okay? One more big negative. Of how Nick Fury loses his eye.
Yeah.
I can't help. I mean, one hand, he's like, the last time I trusted someone, I lost an eye. So like, oh, cool backstory. So on one hand, it's like, it's so silly. Of course, he'll always be lying about it.
Right.
On the other hand, it's like, oh, but a cat scratch.
Right.
That is kind of lame.
It's not a cat, though.
That's a Florian or whatever it was.
Yeah, but it didn't like bite out its eye. It just scratched it.
Yeah. So I mean,
so it got infected with some alienness that was on the claw. I don't know. I was surprised that it was so banal how he lost his eye.
Yeah.
I was.
But whatever. It's kind of funny. It is a cat though, so there's two sides to it.
And this movie is all about subverting expectations.
Right.
And so with the bad guy, his eye.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
That's what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
Worked out.
I think they did it. But anyhow, This is so bizarre for me. I'm the one defending the Marvel movie. This is
I
weird.
love it. I love it so much. Because when I came to the table and I found out that you loved this, I was like, okay, I'm really excited to find out why. Because it seems that people hate or love this movie just to pick a side. Because when I was looking through reviews, I was genuinely trying to find people who liked this movie. And at the start of every positive review, it said, I don't know what the haters are talking about, but I loved this movie. And it wasn't just like, hey, this was a really good movie, I liked it. It was always calling out the other side and then defending it.
Yeah.
And
See, but like you two are illustrating one of the main reasons I think no one should be on social media. Because it has poisoned the well of this movie, apparently for both of you. Donald, your background with comics, like I said earlier, I can see why you would just hate this movie. I didn't know any of that, and I didn't know any of the scuttlebutt about feminist this and that. I just came to this as a movie, knowing nothing, and I feel like potentially knowing all of the meta commentary around something limits you in how you can, in what you can see and how you can interact with the film. I don't know, what do you think?
I think that's really important, because I think most of the movies that I love, I saw way after the fact. But the problem is that in the movie industry, you need people to like it opening weekend.
Right.
And so they won't make movies that you like unless it's commercially successful. And that's why a lot of cult classics are movies that people didn't want to make. Like Forrest Gump, for example, they didn't want to fund that movie the way that they wanted to make it. And it only got made because Tom Hanks and the director personally funded it. And because they believed in it and it was so successful, we have it today. But in commercial movies like this, they're willing to do whatever they can to just sell the movie. I don't know if that
we
made
could
any
talk.
coherence.
No, we could talk so much about the industry and how they focus on numbers. Obviously, they're trying to make money. Obviously, but now and streaming is this whole different side of things and how either people watch it or just it gets ignored. But like if it would have bombed if it came out. But wait, 2019. The last big movie for all Hollywood. This movie, this year, because obviously 2020, COVID. No movie's making $1 billion. And since then, only a year do. 2019 is a significant year historically because I looked it up, and if this is accurate, 9 movies made over $1 billion.
Wow.
And most of them are Disney movies.
I'm sure.
Obviously, Endgame. Endgame was the highest grossing movie of all time until they re-released Avatar in China. Now Avatar once again became the highest grossing and probably will forever. Then we had Lion King, Frozen 2, Spider-Man Far From Home, Captain Marvel, Toy Story 4, Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, and Aladdin. Those are the Disney movies that made $1 billion this year.
Wow.
And now, I don't know if we are ever going to get to another year where that many movies will make that much money ever again. Because that's a lot of movies that people are spending their hard-earned cash to go see.
I could talk about this for hours,
right?
But the invention of our cell phones, I believe, is killing the movie industry as we know it, because people are consuming entertainment in a different way.
Yeah.
I agree.
Actually, Matt Damon has a great when he was on Hot Wings or Hot Ones eating chicken wings. He actually has a really succinct explanation of one major change, because if a movie didn't do well, it had a DVD release or physical media release, and it was almost like opening again. You knew you were going to make money, and that's why in the 90s we got a lot of different types of films, like dramas or adult dramas, I meant. And now they're less popular now because they're not making movies, because now we have the streaming and people watching on streaming. You just have to wait a few months to watch a movie on Disney Plus type of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's the whole industry's changing, and it might collapse because movies that
I don't know that the industry will collapse, but the screening of films, I think, is on its way out. For sure.
It's just a change. It's like the difference between talkies and silent films. We're just in a shakeup.
Yeah.
My professional background is in food, but McDonald's changed the restaurant world because most restaurants were mom and pops, even drive-ins. Like restaurants were sit down and eat out, right? Yep. And then that changed the way everyone eats. And then now we're starting to see a shakeup of the restaurant world again because these chain restaurants that functioned on low labor, low food costs. Food cost is high, labor is high, and so what we're seeing now is we're seeing kind of the fall of fast food and the rise of quick service because people don't have the money during the inflation to go out to a sit-down restaurant. What used to be a cheap option is now just as expensive as a sit-down restaurant.
Right.
So restaurants like Chipotle, Five Guys, these kind of restaurants are on the rise because it's kind of in the middle. And I think we're seeing that with film where people are getting... You don't see comedy movies anymore because people are making the same jokes that you used to see on the big screen on TikTok.
TikToks, yeah.
And so you don't have funded comedy movies anymore. And so we're just going to see entertainment change as we know it. And when our kids are in high school... Ryan and me, because I know you have older children, Dietz.
I do.
Cinephiles are going to be an old man sport, like men used to love westerns and classic cars. You know,
just getting kids to watch or see the value of old movies. Anyway, man, we could talk. There's so many things about.
Philosophy the Real. This movie is all about identity,
Nice.
Which I do understand how you guys don't like this, but of all of the movies, of all of the Marvel movies that we've listened or watched, I feel like this one is the richest in terms of looking at identity. What does it mean to be a person? Are you defined by your physical, which we have the scroll, and as soon as they become someone else, are they that person? Are they not that person? We've got, are we defined by our past? So Captain Marvel represents both answers to that question. When she doesn't remember her past, the answer is no. She's not defined by her past. She's defined by what she's doing right now, how she's acting, the choices that she's making. But then as soon as she does remember her past, she gives us the opposite answer to that. Yes, you were 100% defined by your past because the choices that she made and the people that she knew in her past end up shaping the decision that she makes to switch sides, I feel, which is why I felt like her decision to switch sides was not so much based on Talos saying, we're sad and whatever, and it's more based on she remembers the person that she was before, and the relationships that she had before, and supporting the scroll is more justifiable to her in the context of who she was in the past. And so this is another reason why I really, really like this movie, is because it doesn't necessarily give us a solid answer, but it presents all of the sides. So Captain Marvel, is she who she is because of her physical self? 100%, yes. Is she who she is because of her memories? Yes. Is she not who she is because of her memories? Also, yes. And in terms of identity, I don't know, like Memento's another one I've already mentioned that really explores the question of identity, but I feel like this is a really good example of like who are we, and it forces us to consider that. So That's philosophy of the real.
Very cool.
Ethics of the real, ironically enough, was the Cree credo. Put your people's needs before your own, which obviously they don't believe. By the end, we realize they don't believe. But that's one of the, in my opinion, one of the strongest ethical schools that comes from empathetic ethics, which is like the idea that if I were that person, what would I want? What would I need? And do I have a responsibility to help make that happen if I can? And so even though the Cree themselves don't live up to their ethical school, I feel like Captain Marvel does. And so, again, that moment where she changes sides, I think ethically makes perfect sense. Because if she bought into Jude Law and the other guys' programming about put other people's needs before your own, if she internalized that, there is no other choice she could have made. She had to put those people's needs above her own. And so for me, again, to return to my initial thing, this is the first movie that I feel like everything fits together logically. All of the stuff that needed to be seeded was seeded. Ethically, it makes sense what she does, the choices that she makes. Philosophically, it's rich, it's nuanced in terms of the answers to the different philosophical questions. So yeah, I don't understand why anyone wouldn't enjoy this movie, but now I do, because you guys have been poisoned by social media and you have this deep, rich background in comics. So Donald's makes sense. The rest of all y'all listening, you need to get off your frickin' social media, uninstall Instagram and Snapchat and all that crap, and think for yourselves.
Wow.
Okay, that's it. I'm done. That's my rant.
I mentioned this a few minutes back. I don't think it's going to make it in to the rest of the podcast. but I do want to emphasize that when this movie came out, it was in the shadow of Wonder Woman.
Sure.
Gal Gadot's portrayal of Wonder Woman was endearing, empathetic, feminine.
Yeah.
And a lot of people thought it was just a much more entertaining, better movie. And so this movie comes in. Brie Larson as Captain Marvel is less likable.
Sure.
She's less sweet.
Sure.
She's annoying.
And I think the movie is less entertaining than Wonder Woman.
Sure.
And so I think that is why a lot of people just kind of choose to dislike it. Because I think it's kale versus the Wonder Woman's lettuce. Because Wonder Woman arguably is less. Hearing you talk about this movie, Dietz, is probably has like less depth, but it just tastes better.
Yeah.
Sure.
Or even like, I don't know how many years it's been. Like, not even with Wonder Woman in mind, it's like, I just wish some of these things were different here, I guess.
Okay, but can I just point out, Dawn, that what you just said illustrates exactly what I consider to be the problem with this diet of candy movies. That's exactly the problem. If we put these Wonder Woman, which I haven't seen, and this movie, and the reason we're choosing Wonder Woman over this movie is because it's more fluffy and it tastes better, metaphorically speaking, that's a massive problem. Because we are becoming, or already are, a group of people that cannot watch a philosophical or ethically complex movie anymore. As a whole, there are definitely people.
Okay.
I think
Okay.
Hold on, but like
the answer to this, gentlemen, is that we, as a society, we need to read books.
Yeah.
And I would like to ask you, as
Always be
English
curious.
teachers, if you could find a way to incorporate a book list in each episode to ask people, like, this is the movie we read. If you want more of this theme in a better format, read this book.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Books
no,
are
I
good.
totally agree. We should read more books and watch less movies, but I'm a little pessimistic that is going to happen because I feel like
But this podcast will take off.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. I feel like that ship sailed with the iPad or with the iPhone.
Like the "Welcome to the Internet" song by Bo Burnham.
Yep.
And I think that's the value of this podcast is unfortunately books probably won't make a resurgent. And so I think when we have people making commentary of the quality of movies, we will get hopefully we'll get a higher quality of content that can steer people in a more moral and philosophical positive direction.
Yeah, I hope so.
I honestly don't know if books are on the decline because, I mean, not that I see a lot of kids reading,
As
but
publishers going under.
But there are plenty of big name numbers going on like Book Talk. People just talking about books on TikTok. Like there's a huge audience, and I think people just want to be told. I guess maybe it's easier now to be told, "Hey, read this because I liked it now."
Right.
I believe that movies should be made as art and as a message from the creator to the audience. And the reason that we have all of these problems, again, in my opinion, is that so many fingers get stuck in the pie that the message that they really wanted to put in there gets diluted. And I think because you're such a literary mind, you can kind of read what they were trying to say, and for the untrained masses that are watching it, people who didn't read their assigned reading in high school, people who don't read after they graduate, those people aren't going to pick up on that and are quicker to judge.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, and I applaud you guys for trying to reach those people and change the minds of people who need it.
Yeah, but yeah, everyone should think critically about their movies.
I agree. Didn't get the dessert.
Oh, do they eat anything in this?
The cat does.
Oh yeah, the best dessert of the reel ever. The cat just eats those people, eats the
so
tesseract.
It's a great moment.
Yeah. It's like, it's a cat. That is the best one, the best dessert of the reel. Next week is Endgame.
Okay.
What are your predictions for Endgame? It's
Mine?
Yeah, you've never seen it. You haven't seen any trailers. To this movie's credit, the trailers that they did show were literally only in the 30 minutes for the most part. And even then, some of them were tweaked still. Like, they didn't want anyone to know anything. And you are going in as blind as it is possible to go in 2024.
True.
What do you think will happen?
Yeah, so because I know there's a Phase 4, and because I know some of the movies in Phase 4, and because I also know that some of those characters got, what do they call it? Dusted? Floofted?
Well, you tell it, everyone. I say dusted.
Dusted in Infinity War, I think I'm probably going to hate Endgame with my whole soul. Is probably what is going to happen because I feel like they're going to undo Infinity War, and that will probably piss me off more than anything else of any of these movies that we watch.
Hold on.
So
wait,
that's my
not
prediction.
Just to kind of like prepare your mind for next week, I suppose. We know these characters are not gone forever. Like, we going into it in 2019, we're like, somehow something's gonna happen.
Well, we don't know that though.
Oh, okay. We don't know.
Sure. Okay, we know based on what we know of Disney, we know that yes, they were not ever going to disappear because there's still cash to be made from these characters. This is an absurd statement, but if they were willing to put the money aside and embrace the art, they would stay dead.
Okay, so you haven't seen it yet, but I think, because this movie, it's over 3 hours long.
Oh my
and okay, but I think that's a good thing, because I honestly, and when you watch it, have this in mind. I think the first act, we'll say, is like, yeah, we're not just trying to be an episode of TV here. We want you to like just focus on these characters and these people and what's going on. We want you to think about the deeper stuff here.
Okay.
I think
I
it's
hope
like
so.
we're using our 3-hour runtime to be
3 hours.
yeah, and it's
That's depressing.
you
to
could
me.
Infinity War could have been 3 hours, but no, like let's keep going. Endgame, I think, is like let's slow down a little bit here and there.
Okay.
Do you agree with that?
Endgame is really 2 movies
Kinda.
that they put together. My prediction for you, Dietz, is that you're going to both love and hate this next movie.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's going to be large portions. You can call me and I can tell you what I think about this movie after you've watched it. But yeah, you're gonna like some moments. There's gonna be moments in there that you're really gonna like. But I think your prediction probably isn't too far off.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I have that to look forward to.
Man, I wish.
Torturing you is the whole idea of this podcast, right?
It is.
Like we can pretend it's to educate people, but it's really just to force you to do
this
things you hate.
Which is okay.
Yeah.
It's all right to do things that are hard that you don't like.
I think my favorite part about you doing this is I love it. So again, going back to food, I think a lot of people are prejudiced against food just because they've made up their mind that they don't like it. And
Right.
it's my philosophy that people should try things that they don't like.
I agree.
Because it's going to expand their mind.
Oh,
100%.
We talked about that in the Infinity War episode.
Yep, I agree.
About
And
prejudice.
listening to Captain America 3 Civil War, your guys' podcast on that, I loved that moment when you're like, some of this is really good. And it's because you do have a lot of people working on these movies who really care and want to elevate them. The problem is sometimes the studio comes in and destroys that effort. And you're going to see, unfortunately, more of that in Phase 4.
Thanks for listening. As always, think critically about your movies you watch, even if you don't like them.
Probably especially if you don't like them.
Yeah, in my film class, I don't let students say this movie's bad, and that's it. They have to explain why.
Absolutely.
Anyway, give us a like, write us a review. That definitely helps other people find the podcast.
Yeah, share with anyone that you know that you feel like would like it or benefit from it.
And of course, as always, we love you.
We do love you. Thanks for listening.
Bye.